me otherwise. So I am very pleased to introduce Sherry Punak-Murphy this afternoon. She's a biologist who works out at the Shiloh base, but helps care for creation throughout Manitoba. She's the chair of Bee City Brandon, a group that works toward making Brandon a pollinator-friendly city. Since over 1,000 different plants that are grown for food rely on pollinators to produce that food, it is in our best interest to know not only who our pollinators are, but what we can grow in our yards, our parks, our green spaces to make sure that the pollinators keep coming back. Sherry's the perfect person to give us this information because she has a love for all creatures, great and small, but especially for the littlest among us. Since childhood, she's been enamored with insects, and I know we're all looking forward to hearing about the ways we can protect and care for the 350 different species of bees that are here in Manitoba. So I'm pleased to turn my microphone over to Sherry Punak-Murphy.
Thank you for that wonderful introduction. Give me teary-eyed. Well, happy Earth Day, everybody. I will share my desktop here. Share screen. And we'll get going. There, everyone see that all right? Yeah, excellent.
Looks good.
Good, good. As Madeline was saying, I'm the chairperson of Bee City Brandon. It's sort of my passion is, as she said, insects, and bees are all the buzz lately. So before I start, I want to do a land acknowledgement that we respect the treaties that were made on these lands and acknowledge that the city of Brandon is located on Treaty 2 lands. Wherever you are watching, we welcome you to the traditional homelands of the Dakota, Anishinaabe, Ojibwe, Cree, Dene, and Métis people. Together, we acknowledge and respect the history, land, and the people of this area. So today, I want to discuss about who we are as Bee City Brandon, the importance of native pollinators, bee literacy, what do bees need, and what you can do to help pollinators. And then at the end, we'll have a question, and you can also put your questions in the chat. So who is Bee City Brandon? We are a small group of committed Brandon citizens who understand the importance of pollinators and want to communicate to others in our community. We do this through educational means by teaching others, such as this talk, and giving the importance of native plant species for native pollinators' survival. Now, we are a very interesting little committee made solely on women, which we call ourselves the Hive. There's a biogeographer, which is myself. We have a bee scientist, an English professor who researches bees in literature, a horticulturalist, a master gardeners, artists, nursery workers, park interpreters, and Lindsay from the city of Brandon is represented on our committee. And we're all very passionate about bees, about pollinators, and to educate other people about these wonderful little creatures that we can't live without. And we became the first bee city in Manitoba in May 2018. And we did that. It was myself and Melanie Dubois presented to council, and it was unanimously passed that they would support Brandon being a bee city, especially when we told them we'd be the first one in Manitoba. So yeah, we beat out Winnipeg, so that's great. So insects, the little ones that rule the world. We think we do, but without insects, we wouldn't exist. So there are over 3 million living species of insects. Oh, sorry. There are 3 million living species Of those 3 million living species of insects, only 900,000 have been identified and named. So the numbers are just astronomical. At any one time, there are 10 quintillion individual insects alive. We all think about our bees and our butterflies, but there's so many more different types of insects worldwide. So our concentration for Bee City Brandon is actually with pollinators, and it's not just bees. There are over 200,000 pollinators worldwide. And we want to focus on them because, whoops, I'm pressing when I shouldn't be pressing. This picture that you see here is actually a grocery store, a food market that has had removed everything that requires pollinators to make the food. So if we were to lose our pollinators, this is what we would have for food. Some of the examples of food that we eat that need pollinators are bananas, blueberries, melons, pumpkins, tomatoes, almonds. Without these little creatures that mainly we complain about, we wouldn't have food to eat. And that's an incredible thing to me when I think about it. Now, there are different types of pollinators, not just bees. There are butterflies, pollinate, moths, beetles, flies, ants, wasps, and then you also have the larger ones, the birds, bats, mice, other types of mammals, and hummingbirds. And this is types of pollinators from around the world, not just Brandon, or Manitoba. It's all around the world that these different creatures have been adapted to pollinate plants, and the plants have been adapted to be pollinated by these creatures. So I love talking about chocolate. I love eating chocolate. I love having chocolate. And with Easter just recently passed, we've all had chocolate, right? But did you know that it's a fly is the only pollinator of chocolate of the kawako tree? So this plant species has a very complex reproductive system, and only one group of this very small fly, known as no-see-ums, probably seen no-see-ums, different species and genus, but these little guys that I have pictured there, not to scale, just so you know, the fly's not that big. It's the only thing that pollinates chocolate. So we owe chocolate to insects. And then our world's largest pollinator is actually a lemur, the black and white ruffed lemur. And it uses its hands to pull open the part of the tough flowers of these plants. And they stick in their long snouts and tongues deep in the flower, and they collect the pollen on their fur. So when they go to the next plant, they fertilize that plant. Also not from Manitoba. And then you have bat pollinators. Not so much up here. Our bats eat moths and mosquitoes and all that sort of stuff. But down south, this particular bat, and as you can see in the picture, they've got a test tube. And if you look at the length of the test tube, that's its tongue. And this flower has developed so that it would only be pollinated by this species of bat. And when it puts its head in the flower, it gets, much like the lemur, the pollen on its face. And then it goes to the next flower, slurps up the nectar, and then gets the pollen, pollinates the plants. And it's just incredible how nature actually has developed these two different things to work together. So because we're Bee City Brandon, I have to mention bees. There are over 20,000 different bees in the world, 800 in Canada, and in Manitoba, around 350. We've been really fortunate in Manitoba is that we actually have a bee scientist working at the University of Manitoba. And he's been collecting bees across the province, identifying them, and every year discovering new species of native bees. This bee right here is Brandon's official bumblebee, the orange belted bumblebee, which was voted in last year. Big fuzzy. So what exactly makes a bee? They are fluffy because they pick up pollen and stuff from their fur. I don't know whether you call it fur, hairs. That would be the word that you would use. It has a wide body. It has 4 wings, and it has eyes at the side of their heads. That's important because there are some fluffy flies, but flies only have 2 wings, and they have their eyes in the front of their head. So most people think there are 2 kinds of bees, honeybees and bumblebees. Honeybees came from Europe, and they live on farms like cattle. They're actually considered livestock. They are not able to survive without human intervention. They are not native to Manitoba. As Bee City Brandon, we have put in our terms of reference that we will not provide information on honeybees, only on native bees. We do that because honeybees are, it's a science all on its own, and there are far more experts in Westman and in Manitoba that deal with honeybees than with us. We consider ourselves to be a little bit more knowledgeable on the native bee populations. So native bees don't make honey, and they can take care of themselves. They don't need human intervention to live. There are bumblebees, there are sweat bees, there are mason bees, there are mining bees, there are leafcutter bees, they're big bees, they're teeny tiny little bees. You wouldn't believe, well, there's 350 in Manitoba. So in a lifetime, you probably would never see all the different types of bees. Okay, most native bees that we have in Manitoba are solitary, meaning that the queen will mate and then create her own nest and collect pollen for her offspring. And then at the end of the season, the queen will die and the colony will die. And then the new queen will actually overwinter in the ground. 80% of the nests are in the ground. They usually go into holes such as gopher holes, or they dig their own holes. And they each have a different nest structure architecture. Females, as much like the same as Bee City Brandon, do all the work. The males are just around for a good time and then they pass away. The females, they collect the pollen, lay the eggs, and build the nests. And there's usually here in Manitoba only 1 generation a year. So what do bees need? It's a question that I get asked. They need a place to live, just like us. They need food for a whole entire field season for, well, my biologist in me's coming out. They need food for the whole spring, summer, fall. And they need protection from poison and digging because most of them are underground. So here's a cute little ground nesting bee. Sorry, I don't know the species. This is from Melanie Dubois' talk. And then 20% of bees are stem and wood nesting. And some of you have probably seen these nesting boxes at the Green Spot, Canadian Tire. We do have something on our webpage that talks about care of these nesting boxes for bees. They are actually quite intensive, the amount of work you have to do. You just don't put it up and the bees come and then you never clean it. It needs to be cleaned because there might be a spread of mites or pathogens to other species of bees. So this is the ground nesters. And if you look on the first picture, you can see a little bit of yellow. It's probably not that great a quality, but a little bit of yellow and tiny little holes. That's the queen going in to make what you see on the far right is the tunnels, the drawing of the tunnels. What you see on top is just the holes. And so this is what it looks like underground. Each little pod has an egg and then pollen sac. And if you look really closely, you can see the larvae of the bee down at the bottom. So those are our ground nesters. Our stem nesters are really cool. I don't know whether you've ever noticed, especially in raspberries, if you leave your raspberry canes out during the winter, this might happen. But what they do is they put a little mud and they put pollen nectar and then they lay an egg. And then they build another wall, put pollen nectar, egg, wall, and they do that all the way through. Then they seal it up. The eggs hatch, the larvae feed on the pollen and nectar, and then go through their stages of development, and then eventually burrow their way out. We have new bees. So when we talk about food for the whole season, here in Manitoba, we belong to native mixed grass prairie, aspen parkland. This is a prairie site at Canadian Forces Base Shiloh. And as you can see, the multitude of different flowers, different heights, different colors, the grass is there. Grass also needs to be pollinated as well. So how can we do this to our yards? It's called naturescaping. Naturescape describes the approach to living in our yards and our environment and identifying projects designed to bring back our natural habitat. As opposed to just having a lawn, actually bringing natural materials into your yard in order to make it look like the previous picture. The neat thing about native plants is that you don't need pesticides, you don't need herbicides, fertilizers. You don't have to put them in little blankets to protect them from the cold. If it doesn't rain, you don't need to water them. It's a win-win situation with native plants. Native plants feed our native pollinators, and the whole system just sort of works well. So what is a prairie? A prairie is dominated by a mixture of grasses, wildflowers, and low-growing shrubs. Some of the common plant species here in Westman include blue grama grass and purple coneflower, echinacea, the stuff you take when you get a scratchy throat. So using native plants to grow, they have developed the ability to survive and reproduce in our environment here in Westman. There are very many different species that are available at local native plant and seed suppliers. I know that our local nurseries are trying to get in native species. There are also native plant suppliers here in Manitoba that are close. I have a sheet that I can pass to Madeline that she can distribute to you if you want some more information that we created for the Naturescape Challenge here through the Environment Committee, Brandon Environment Committee. So the first thing you would have to do is to identify a spot. Like, you don't need a great big huge area to plant native plants for pollinators. You just need to know the soil type, moisture, sun, shade, the same thing you would do if you were planting your garden. The only thing that I would caution about native plants is that you would go to the store and you go, oh, Sherry was talking about native plants. And oh my goodness, here's a plant packet of wildflower seeds. I'm gonna buy this and I'm gonna plant that in my yard. There are no regulations on to what has to go into a wildflower mix. When I talk about native wildflowers, I'm talking about native wildflowers to Manitoba. A lot of those kits that you get are actually native plants from the southern states. And some of those plants are actually invasive alien species, meaning they're not native to Manitoba, and they will disrupt and take over. A good example of this is baby's breath is a good example. Everybody loves baby's breath for their flower arrangements and stuff, but it's highly invasive. I got a big problem with it at Shiloh. And what is it called? Creeping bellflower is another one. If you've got it in your yard and you've been trying to get rid of it, good luck to you. If you figure out a way, drop me a note sometime. So these seed packets may sometimes have invasive species in them. So you have to look at the scientific names of the plants. That will tell you whether or not it is invasive or not. And you can check on our website, bcitybrandon.com. And we have a list of scientific names for the plant species. These plants, the oxeye daisy, Queen Anne's lace, dame's rockets, baby's breath, all of those, they may look nice. They actually may be useful to pollinators, but they're highly invasive and not good for the native mixed grass prairie here in Westman. Here's baby's breath, my favorite. Actually, no. And dame's rockets and oxeye daisies. So when I talk about wildflowers, there's so many here in Westman. Pictured is our prairie crocus, which has just bloomed. But you also have common yarrow, onions. Wild onions have beautiful flower heads. Pussy toes are just tiny little plants. Prairie sage, prairie and pasture sage, which is used by our Indigenous communities for smudging. Asters, ground plum, harebells, which is a nice alternative to creeping bellflowers. White prairie clover and purple coneflower, or echinacea, which we grew it and dug up the roots and squashed the roots and made a tincture with vodka for when we have that prickly throat. I don't know whether it works. I don't know whether it's the purple coneflower, echinacea, or whether it's the vodka, but what difference does it make? Strawberries, there's a wild strawberry. It is teeny little fruit, not like the ones that we can get at the U-Pick farm, but oh, so sweet. Northern bedstraw, three-flowered avens, which are just blooming right now, blazing star, and violets. And all these little short wildflowers grow throughout the field season, throughout the summer. Gotta quit saying field season. Then we have our medium wildflowers, Solomon seals, coneflowers, black-eyed Susans, goldenrods. Pictured here is a wild bergamot. Makes a wonderful tea. Gaillardier, sunflowers. Pollinators love sunflowers. Blazing stars, beautiful purple flowers. And of course, the lily. And then our taller wildflowers, this here is a giant hyssop. Swamp milkweed, asters, Joe Pye weed. Bees go nuts for Joe Pye weed. They need their toes a little wet, but the bees go crazy over them. Sunflowers, metal rue, which blooms in the spring. These are all different sizes, so you can have the different levels in your garden, just like you're doing now with non-native species. And no native garden would be complete without grass. Now, if you've ever been to the Riverbank Discovery Center, that's a picture from the Riverbank Discovery Center, that grass in the foreground is big blue stem. And it's a native species. Because we're a mixed grass prairie, we have a mixture of tall grass prairie species and short grass prairie species, hence the term mixed grass species. So some of the native grass species are beautiful. Little blue stem, big blue stem has that nice rusty color. I don't know why it's called blue stem. It's more of a burgundy. Canada wild rye, switchgrass, needlegrass, they're all beautiful grasses when planted singly. Well, they're beautiful grasses when they're in the prairie, but when they're planted singly, they're nice, beautiful bunch grasses. So what bees and pollinators don't need is poisons. And stay away from bedding plants that have neonicotines. What they've done is they've actually put a chemical inside the plant. So when the plant is eating, it can paralyze and kill the insects. And unfortunately, it not only kills the insects that they're trying to eradicate in some sort of way to prevent them from eating stuff that we need, it also harms our beneficial insects. And there are far more beneficial insects than there are detrimental ones. So before you spray, squish an insect, remember 999 out of every 1,000 insects is actually beneficial and harmless. If you get anything out of this presentation, I want you to remember that. It's only the one mosquito, but there are 999 insects that are beneficial. So what can you do to save pollinators here in Westman? You can plant native plant species like some of the ones that I've just discussed. Leave the weeds in the spring. If somebody comes up to you and says you got too many dandelions in your yard, you just say, I'm feeding the pollinators. Because what you can do is leave the weeds, and as soon as they start to almost go to seed, mow them down. The bees and the pollinators need the pollen. And in the fall, you've probably heard leave the leaves in the fall. That is because a lot of bees and pollinators, especially the moths and butterflies, actually cocoon underneath our leaves that we leave. And so when you go through with a mulcher, you could be killing thousands of different insects. And they need that protection. They need that heat. It's like a blanket over the ground. And leave some bare ground in your yard. You don't have to place flowers everywhere because the queens and the bees need bare ground in order to create the holes to build their nests. And something that surprises a lot of people is that they need a water source. Insects also need water. And so what I do in my yard is I just have a little bowl, a little shallow bowl. I fill it up with all the rocks that I collect. Because I'm a rock collector, when I go out for walks, they talk to me and I have to pick them up and bring them home. Drives my husband crazy. But I put them in a little bowl and then I pour water in it. And then the insects have little places to stand while they take their little sips of water. So those 5 things are the most important things that you can do to help pollinators and any insects that you want in your yard. So with that, I just have to say, these are the people that have helped out with Bee City Brandon. There is a federal Canadian Bee City Canada, and communities all across Canada are signing a pledge to say that they are going to be a bee city. There's also bee campuses, bee schools, and I think there's bee churches too. I'm not sure on that one. And it's also part of Pollinator Partnership that is also across Canada. And Bee City is also down in the United States under the Xerces Society. And of course, I want to thank the City of Brandon, because without the City of Brandon, we wouldn't even be a committee. Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada, because one of our members is from there. Nature Conservancy Canada, Xerces, and Be Better Manitoba. So there is the City of Brandon's official bee, the orange-belted bumblebee, Bombus ternaris. We want to get stickers with that on there. That's our goal. Or tattoos for everybody. So thank you so much for listening to my talk. We can be contacted at bcitybrandon@gmail.com. And we can be found on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at bcitybrandon. And we also have a website, bcitybrandon.com. So if you have any questions, easy ones, I'm ready for them.
So thank you, Sherry. That was fabulous. At this point, there's certainly no questions in the chat box. I don't know if anybody, remember that if you go over to the reactions, if you want to raise your hand. Oh, here's one. Are there any native trees that pollinators need?
Oh, definitely. Definitely. Our Manitoba maples, which are just starting to flower now, are a good source of early spring food for our native pollinators. Willows. I have been seeing some bees on pussy willows, but any of the willows are good. Anything that's actually flowering, they're usually the trees and the shrubs. And basswoods are good for, I don't know whether basswoods are native or not. Sorry. Don't know about that one. I'm a prairie girl, not a tree girl. So, but the Manitoba maples for sure.
Okay, great. So I believe Maureen Cobb has a question.
Thank you. How would we recognize that bedding plants have the neonics in them that we're to avoid?
See, that's a really tough one because there are no laws saying that they have to label them. A lot of companies now, like big box stores, are actually advertising that they have no neonics in their potted plants. I know that the Green Spot and Alternative Landscaping, you can ask for neonics. The local guys. I heard that Home Depot might not be doing it anymore. But when we tried to contact locally to find out about the neonics, they sent us to the headquarters. And then the headquarters were kind of jumping around the whole thing. So I think that the more we, as consumers, say we don't want this stuff, then the big companies will start to say, you know what, in their dollars, they're going to say, maybe we don't need these materials. So it's a slow process. That's about all I can say about that. I always try to stick local, but there's not saying that they have to sign or state that these things have these neonics in them.
Thank you.
Okay, we're getting a little bit of feedback. So just a reminder, if you are not asking a question right at this moment, it would be best to mute your microphone, please. We had another question from Maroon again, asking again about trees, wondering if the chemical or whatever they're using to spray for the ash borer, if that is also harmful to our pollinators, to other pollinators, are beneficial.
Well, we don't have emerald ash borer here in Brandon or in Westman. It's only in Winnipeg. I'm not sure of the chemical that they're using. They treat the tree, and in my opinion, I don't know much about the chemical that they use to treat emerald ash borer. As a matter of fact, I know nothing about the chemical that they treat emerald ash borer with. If it can kill emerald ash borer, it can kill any insect. It's not specific to that plant. I know that I do know that they're not spraying all the ash trees. They're putting chemical inside the tree individually. That I do know. So it's not like a helicopter coming over and dropping a whole bunch of pesticides.
Well, we do have a forestry program here in Brandon, so that might be a better question to to check the website for Kayla, so the person, and see if that she would have an answer for that, I'm sure.
Oh, definitely.
And I believe that Wayne Clayton also has a question. Wayne,
maybe you could put your question in the chat box. It sounds like Wayne's microphone has gone into B mode. We can't understand you. It sounds like something in the speed. So maybe you could put your question in the chat box.
And while we wait for Wayne to do that, I have a question. So now
Yes,
that we are a bee city, has that changed the policy for spraying for the city of Brandon? Have they redone their policy regarding how often, or has that changed anything?
I'm the only spraying that I know of that they do that would impact pollinators would be mosquito control. And that actually occurs during the evening, and a lot of time, like at night, and a lot of time the bees are already in their nests. And in order for the chemical to work, it has to actually contact the insect, like make contact with the insect. Because bees are much bigger than mosquitoes, they need more of the chemical attached to them than, say, a mosquito. It was one of the things that when we presented to council that they were quite concerned about, because there's a health risk in regards to mosquitoes control. And it usually comes from health, Manitoba Health, that says that we have to, the trap numbers are too big and we have to spray. So it's a balancing act, but our pollinators, they're not the target species. They're bigger than the target species, and it takes a lot more of the chemical in order to kill them. But so no, the city of Brandon's not changing their mosquito policy. And we're fine with that. Health trumps the environment, unfortunately.
I mean, it's so intertwined. But anyway, I'm
Yes.
reassured by that, knowing that, yeah, thinking about spraying at night and the insects, the pollinators being underground or undercover, that makes me feel better. Okay, Wayne, you want to try again?
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
So my question was in regards to your comment about all these native bees being solitary. So once the queen is fertilized, do they not have any kind of support in the colony, or are they just totally solitary?
They're solitary. Like their offspring will. I really don't know the exactly how it works, but their offspring will come out and collect pollen, but they're not nursing the young like you would with a honeybee.
So do
it's
they
like
return?
A colony, but they're not feeding each other.
No, but there would be more than one bee in that goes into that hole.
Yes.
Okay.
But how their social system works, I'm not really too clear. I know it's not like honeybees. There's so much to learn.
Yes, there is. Well, with 350 species in Manitoba alone, that's a lot to learn about.
And that's just the bees.
Yes, exactly.
I mean, I'm hip about the beetles, flies, and the butterflies. And...
Yes. So do we have any other questions? It looks like maybe not.
I've got a question.
Perfect.
Sherry, we're out on an acreage by Kemney, and I'm going to look at that one particular daisy that you noted, because I think we have some of those in our ditch that we've let grow. They are kind of pretty, but we'll check that out. We're on about 2¼ acres. We've let a good part of the yard, we don't mow it. We've just let it go back. We haven't had a lot of success. We have milkweed that comes up naturally in that area and some things from the farm behind us, but we haven't had a lot of success with native flowers in the grass area. What's the best? Is there some good practices for trying to get some of those native wildflowers to kind of take root? Got a lot of blue grama.
Blue grama is good. What I would do myself if I had an acreage is that I would actually get seed.
Right.
I would go and collect seed, or I would get it from Skinner Seeds, and just broadcast it out.
Okay.
And hope for the best. That's our problem, that we've altered our prairie landscape so much that it's hard to get it back to the way it, like the picture that I showed you of Shiloh. I mean, it's never been tilled under. So that is what it looked like. And in order to get it back to that, it takes a lot of work. And it never looks like that. Mother Nature's got a way of making things pretty all on her own.
I believe Wayne has another question.
So as Ryan Boyd said in his talk, some of the native landscape was also grazed by bison. So that's part of developing that whole bunch of biodiversity. So maybe Craig needs a goat.
Yes.
I say yes, yes, several.
And also fire is really important with native prairie. I tell you to set it on fire in the fall, but don't. Don't listen to me.
So you're encouraging Craig to become a fire person, eh?
No, I'm not encouraging that at all.
I think the goat's a better idea.
Yes, I think so too.
Well, they'll get the spurge too.
Yes, they will.
And
So
you can also eat them, Craig. You know, they tell me that goat meat's quite good.
A win-win for everyone.
That's right. It's win-win-win all the way around, except for maybe the goat.
Well, he lived a good life.
So I would just like to say on behalf of everyone here, Sherry, thank you very much. That's very knowledgeable. I feel like I learned a little bit, and hopefully now we all have a little more respect for our pollinators. There's tends to be a real, people don't like bees, right? And so it would be good if we all have a little more respect. And also now we have a little bit of a responsibility to educate our friends, our family, our neighbors about the importance of our pollinators. And who knows, maybe we'll have a number of pollinator gardens here in Brandon, and wouldn't that be a great thing? So yeah, thank you all for joining us. I believe that, I think Michelle asked for